Hey guys, I just did a set of videos about being adopted, and feel free to subscribe if you wish. I'm not a video editor. I don't do this for a living. I have some videos out there, but they're subject specific and have nothing to do with this. This set of videos that I just uploaded in this whole link is talking about adoption. This is based on personal experience mostly, and a good portion of it is also the observation of friends and family and other people that have or dealt with adoption. I just observe, and I've talked to other kids that have been adopted and see how things have turned out. For some, it's turned out really, really great, especially when it's a sole kid situation. For others, not so much. And again, just take it all with a grain of salt. I'm not saying don't adopt. It's just things to consider based on what has happened to a lot of others. Feel free to subscribe. The only thing I have to add to the videos that I did is this. When I was about 12 years old, I got emotional over something and told my family that I wish they hadn't adopted me. And they said, well, that's fine. When you're 18, you can pack up your stuff and leave. And pretty much at every opportunity after that, that's the thing that they drove into my head. And the situation was so bad that I couldn't wait till I was 18. I actually left when I was 16. And that situation in itself is something completely different. But, yeah. So, I know there's a lot of gaps. A lot of silence of me thinking of the stuff from the past. But please bear with me, because, again, I don't do this for a living. And getting into that conversation gets a little bit emotional, and I don't like doing that. I'd rather much bury it more than talk about it much. Anyway, so thank you. Please bear with me and just listen to what I have to say. The video will end abruptly. Forgive me for it. I was starting to talk about something that I really didn't need to talk about. Thank you again. Subscribe if you wish. And here we go. Hey guys, I have some tips for y'all if y'all think about adopting. And you guys may want to think twice about adopting, especially older kids. I was adopted, and I landed in the United States around my 10th birthday. Both my sisters were adopted. The first one was adopted from birth. And then my other one was adopted at the same time I was adopted. They are a ton of work. And if they're anything like me, they still suffer a lot years later. Years. People think that if you take them out of a bad situation and put them in your house, that it'll be a better situation. And in some cases, that's not always true. I didn't have much going for me in the other country. But I haven't really made much here either. You know, people, especially in the United States, have high expectations for foreigners. They expect them to be the next set of people that cure cancer or something of that sort. And the schooling here, I learned to hate. I hate it. But my family was really proud of me when I was younger, that I was only there for a few years and could speak English better than most people in the United States. And they tended to discriminate against Hispanics, for example. Or at least not really discriminate, just kind of use them as an example of how they were there for over 10 years and still couldn't speak English fluently. But when I speak to people in the South, they look at me and say, well, you don't really have an accent, which is kind of a quiet diss, basically. I didn't have much going for me in the other country, and I really haven't done much in this one either. Perhaps it's destiny. Perhaps it's just how it is. And I know, for me, one of the biggest things that I faced when I was younger, parents aren't supposed to have favorites, but they do. And you see it in how they treat them. I really didn't have much of a social life, and even in my later years, I have trouble conversing with people. I don't socialize well with them because I never really had any friends when I was younger. My family had a bad habit of digging their hands into anybody that I wanted to have as a friend, and if they didn't approve of them, you weren't allowed to be there with them. I remember when I was younger, I wanted the friends that I did hang out with, which were usually kind of trashy people, low grade of people, because the lower end of people don't tend to judge as harshly. The high and mighty and stuck up people tend to judge rather harshly, especially of the people that are below them. So, for example, a pretty blonde, blue-eyed girl would judge a kid that doesn't look as good quite harshly. But back to that social aspect, I wasn't taught to socialize, and in my later years, I heavily suffered from it. It hurt me in my job. It hurt me trying to make friends. It hurt me doing things. It drove you to be a clown, and people like to laugh at the clown, but they don't necessarily want to do anything else with the clown, not even trust him. And I was always taught, treat others the way you'd want to be treated. But I never found that to be very good. It's great. It makes a very good slave out of you. You're an outstanding slave. But you're not a very good friend, leader, confidant, whatever. My sister that got adopted with me, you know, we both had lots of issues. Her much more so. So much so that my family either gave her away or sold her. And I'm pretty sure they gave her away to another family. Kind of messed with your head as a kid, you know. To this day, certain family members brag about how they taught my younger sister sign language instead of trying to figure out what she wanted through the fussiness. Like, if she was hungry as a baby, if she was hungry or needed diaper changed or needed something. You know how babies are. They tend to cry and fuss and throw temper tantrums. Well, this particular family member was, and to this day, is still proud that they taught the baby sign language, which is great, you know. But there's an actual smart person in this world, I believe she's a lady, who analyzed babies based on their fussiness and actually broke down what each type of fussiness means. Now, most people don't exactly, you know, analyze the entire world, but they can figure out what their baby needs based on what the baby does. And that smart person actually was able to figure it out and write a book with it. But it seems like my family didn't even bother to do that. They just trained her like a dog to do certain tricks. So in other words, it kind of shows the lack of love in a way, in my opinion. And it happened with me too. Now granted, I didn't do sign language, but there were other things. And learning the English language was one of them. You know, it was a dog learning a trick, and they were proud of it because I was so much better than that god that'd been here for 10 years. Let me get back with you. Anyway, I'm back with you. Long story short, if you're not prepared to deal with any of the issues, health issues, whether it's mental health or physical health, and I know that's kind of an open statement, but some of this stuff can get extremely costly. Heck, what if the kid has cancer and you don't find out until 2 years after you adopt them? Or what if they have mental issues that are just constant money problems? You know, long story short, be sure you're ready to deal with some of these issues when it comes to the financial aspect of it. And, you know, make sure your answer is solid and not substandard. Because a substandard answer when it comes to that kind of stuff may keep the kid out of jail or out of the hospital. But that doesn't mean that they're going to lead a well, how do I put this? Just because they stay out of jail or the hospital does not mean they're going to find success. The other thing with that's kind of a side note, is when you have siblings especially. And one thing I've noticed amongst other friends and such, which, I mean, use friends lightly. I don't have a whole ton of friends, but you get to observe the world. And one thing you've noticed is typically a set of parents will treat their own kid as the golden child, but the adopted child is substandard. And again, you won't find success. Or I knew a set of folks that had kids who were always into sports, always. But they had one other kid that was adopted that was a nerd. And he wanted things that had to do with computers and such. Well, his family didn't want him to be like that. They wanted him to play sports and fit in with the other kids and get forced into that situation. You know, I had a family that was into music. And we had cousins and grandparents and such that were into really, really high-end music. And I wanted to play one instrument. My family wanted me to play two others that had nothing to do with that instrument, with the instrument I wanted. And then we got, during holidays, we got paraded around the cousins and the grandparents. And I hated it so much. Now to this day, I can't play an instrument, nor do I want to. I learned to hate it that much. And it's like, it almost became a thing where it seemed like my parents were trying to live through me and force me down their plan for my life, and not trying to get me to become the best I could become. But they always twisted things and the truth, and heck, at time even, well, I'll leave that part out. They twisted things in such a way that I didn't become the best person I could become. They were trying to get me to become the best person they wanted. Even to this day, it seems like we're there for their benefit, and they're not really there for mine. I'm there to hold them up and support them, not financially, but in things that they want. When it comes to things they want, I'm there for them. But when it comes to things I need or I want, not so much. So, if you're not willing to be fair and impartial and take care of the kid the best way he needs you, or the best way they need you to, there's really no point in adopting. Because at the end of the day, you're just going to be disappointed in them. And people will say, oh no, I wouldn't do that. Oh no, I that's not me. But believe me, I've seen the disappointment. And it's very much real. And people will lie through their teeth and say, oh, not so, we love you. And yeah, that may be true. But you can tell based on their actions of what they do and based on the look on their face when the right thing is said. So if you're not ready to deal with that kind of stuff, you may want to think twice about adopting. And again, a lot of this stuff has to do with what you do at first. And then it gets returned to you later. It's an investment, but that investment can easily fail. And when that investment fails, the investment can see the disappointment in your face. Some sadistic people like that. Most don't, though. As a kid, I needed socialization and needed friends. But at every turn, pretty much, I was not allowed to do it without a leash. I didn't have a normal childhood. And to this day, I have socialization problems. I can't talk. I can't go talk to people. Everybody thinks I'm a weirdo. Don't really fit in very well. And I've had trouble in my life. Had trouble pursuing a career too. I'm loyal. I guess that's about the only good quality I've got. But it doesn't really matter much when you don't have a purpose. Anyway. There'll be more to come, most likely. But my point to you is, adopting a kid doesn't mean that he'll have a better life. Maybe in small ways, but in big ways, not so much. And it doesn't mean that investment is going to pay you back. And it sucks, as the ones with the problems, as the kid with the problems. Sometimes you just feel like giving up. You don't have much going for you, so you just want to curl up and go away. There'll be more. This leads to the next point. How you raise a kid matters. You have the issues of the past, but then the kid shows up and he has different things to figure out now. One, how to deal with the two people that are the authorities in his life, assuming there's only two. And how, especially if you have more than one kid, how the treatment between the children is done. My youngest sister was basically adopted at birth. And she was considered the cute one. And she pretty much, my entire life, she was the favorite one. It could be argued now that she still is. But how you raise them and how you teach them can be a big thing. I know hypocrisy is something I dealt with. The child, both kids were not treated the same, basically. On the surface, they said they would, but then whenever things come up, how one side gets treated and how the other gets treated are two different things. My sister and I were 8 years apart, and for most of the time of my life, it felt like the roles were reversed. You know, she got treated like the grown-up, and I got treated like the young one. At times, even my own dog was treated better than I was. And that was a lot of times. You know, my father tried to sort of treat me the age I was. And a simple example was whenever I'd get picked up from school, my father would let me sit in the front seat. I was old enough that I didn't have to sit in the back like a little boy. And I'm talking, this is during my teenage years now. And he would let me sit on the front seat. Well, my mother, on the other hand, if she came to pick me up, she would make me sit in the back while the dog, like a child, while the dog, that at times she said was a good girl and better than us, would sit in the front. And I would get humiliated and sort of talked down to and treated like dirt. Even when I brought it up to her years later, and even if I were to bring it up right now, because her attitude is typically the same, she gives you kind of this white devilish snicker that just gets under your skin. Like, she can't believe you still have a problem with that. You haven't gotten over it. Grow up. how you treat them matters. I remember a friend of mine had 2 siblings that belonged to the adopted parents. And one of them looked at him one day and said, "When is mom and dad going to send you back to the orphanage?" That kid's entire life was a roller coaster. And he ended up getting into drugs and things that didn't make his parents proud. But that comment right there was never, last I heard, was never corrected. And I know when one of the parents heard it, he basically kind of laughed about it. If you're not prepared to deal with these kids and raise them correctly and evenly across the board and show justice, don't bother, man. You're just making their life and situations worse. That particular guy was into drugs. From the personal experience, it held me back in a lot of ways. And you know, I've heard a couple of things here. First off, the previous generation likes to blame the current generation for all the issues. But it was the previous generation that raised the current generation. I hope to God I don't mess my son over like they have. And there's a reason I only had one son. And buddy, I know that you may be seeing this years in the future, but I'm sorry. But for those that are willing to understand, I only had one son to avoid any of those issues amongst my kids. I heard an old lady one time, the reason you have multiple kids is just in case one fails, you got another one to live with when you get old. You take the most successful one and you live with them. Guess nobody bothers to think about what makes somebody successful and what turns someone else into a loser. I know my family wanted things done their way only. There was no other way that was right. Just their way. Did I do some things wrong? Yeah, I did. Are there things I'm not proud of? Of course, but don't tell them that. I would never admit it to them. But you know, I was supposed to end up in a halfway house, in one of the worst crime-ridden cities when I was getting close to 18. And if I had, I probably would have been on the streets right now doing drugs and crimes and whatever else. Thank God I didn't. But it almost seemed like they were doing that to prove a point. Like they wanted me to come back crawling to them to ask for help and finally submit and do it their way. I've been out of their house for 13 years. And I showed them I could make it. It's not exactly the best life. And I do have a lot of issues still. But a lot of them stem back to how they raised me. And people say, some people say, oh, you can't blame your parents. It's never your parents' fault. It's always your fault. Well, didn't they raise me? Whether they did something good or bad or too much of one thing or too much of another, it ultimately falls back on them. And in my particular case, my parents knew they were doing damage. And even to this day, they joke about it and say, oh, we know we're going to have to spend a lot of money on therapists when they grow up. But yet to this day, when damage rears its ugly head, they don't bother to help. They don't even offer to help. They don't care. Hell, my father won't even ask me for anything, really. Of course, we've gotten kind of sidetracked because every time we do something together, whether I do something for him or he does something for me, it always goes sideways. I'm done asking for his help, and I think he's gotten to the point to where he's the same way. But you can't blame your parents. That's the worst lie anybody can. I even had a very important person tell me that one time. How you raise them matters a lot. You got to be fair and impartial. I even forgive me, I'm sort of sifting through my life and sort of trying to decide what to say and not say, and how to do it in such a manner that it doesn't reveal things, reveal people. Trying to keep it as general as possible. And it's hard when you tend to lose your train of thought sometimes. got to keep it fair and impartial, or you end up finding issues amongst the kids. Now I don't really have success. I'm still trying to figure it out. I'm almost 40 years old and I'm still trying to figure it out. But he always seemed to get used in one manner or another. Even jobs nowadays, they want a nobody to operate a machine with tons of experience. Heck, they want you to have a stinking degree. But they don't pay. Still. I guess I wasn't the kid that cured cancer just because I was adopted and had a good education. Heck, I didn't even really have that great of an education. I went to a public school where they, taught people how to live in a jail cell. 4 walls and a door. Don't do anything without permission. Don't question anything. And then but the positive to that was I made friends. And then I got ripped out of that environment and thrown into a snobby, stuck-up school with people that thought they were all better than you.